Hey guys, welcome to the Norse Seminar. Given the weather this week and the shadiness of having school, I figured this might be the easiest way to keep kids moving on. Okay, so as you're going through this Edpuzzle, make sure that you fill out the handout. Remember, you can stop the video so you have time to write like the different answers. At the end of it, make sure you submit the handout. In the clue that says submit your Norse Seminar handout, make sure you turn that in. Okay, for those of you who already bypassed the seminar, make sure that you go back and watch the video, turn in the handout so you get credit for these. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at North Europe. We look at Europe in general first, and then we really specialize in the different countries. So we can see, like the different landscapes of the North European areas. So we have Iceland and London, Norway and Sweden. So you can see they all look a little bit different, but there's a lot of things that bring them together. So if we look at Europe in general, okay, so we know that the European continent would be the left-hand side of that green landmass, okay? So what we know about Europe, okay, is that it is connected to the other large part of that green landscape, okay, which is Asia. And the two together make up something called Eurasia. Eurasia is the largest landmass in the world. Okay, so if we look at Europe itself, Europe is really just one giant peninsula where the tip of Europe comes out by Spain. Okay, but Europe is also made up of a lot of tinier peninsulas and a lot of islands. Okay, if we look at the general climate of Europe, it mostly has a mild climate because the Atlantic Ocean surrounds them. So the reason that the Atlantic Ocean plays such a part, okay, usually we say climate is based on latitude, how far north or south you are of the equator. Okay, but Europe is a little bit different because the Atlantic Ocean is so big. Okay, because the Atlantic Ocean is so vast or so large, okay, it takes a really long time to warm up and a really long time to cool down. Okay, so the ocean temperature usually stays pretty general, usually like right in the middle. Okay, and then the winds that blow off the ocean really create your temperatures on land. So if your ocean is always hovering around 50 degrees, your temperatures on land are also going to hover around 50 degrees. It makes your temperatures very mild no matter where you are north or south of that equator. Okay, so if we look at the wind that blows across the Atlantic Ocean, it's a wind called the westerlies. These winds travel west to east, given the name westerlies. Okay, and it comes from the Caribbean Sea, which is very warm. Okay, and it blows across the Atlantic Ocean into the European continent. There are three main climates in Europe. Okay, so many of the countries have a climate known as the Marine West Coast climate. This climate is rainy, it's foggy, it's cloudy, mild, usually around 50, 60 degrees, sometimes 40, sometimes 70s, but usually in that range. Okay, if we think about the state of Washington, they have that Marine West Coast climate. It's usually kind of dreary. Okay, the southern part of Norway, Sweden, Finland, they have the humid continental climate. That's the same climate that we have here in Wisconsin, where you have four very distinct seasons, sometimes cold winters, sometimes pretty warm summers. Down that southern portion of Europe, where we look at Spain and Italy and so on, they have that Mediterranean climate. It's dry, it's warm, it's around that 70-degree range. In my opinion, that's pretty perfect. That's just as an opinion. If we look at the water of the Atlantic Ocean, other than just climate, throughout history, this water has been really good because of trade. Okay, so if we think back to like 15, 16, 17, 1800s, most of the trade did happen by ship. Since their harbors are ice-free and connected to navigable rivers, Europe was able to trade out, okay, to the rest of the world and also within their own continent. Okay, a navigable river is simply a river that is able for a ship to pass. It's wide enough, it's deep enough. Some rivers are not navigable, okay, they're too narrow or too shallow. If we look at the languages, okay, language is usually dependent on country, okay, however, most people are also bilingual, so 90% of the people speak two languages fluently. That second language oftentimes is English, okay, and the reason they're all bilingual, or at least most of them are, is because in their education system they are required to learn two languages from little on, so by the time they're adults, they can speak two languages fluently. Religion, most of the people are Christian across the European continent, but remember, Christianity is like this big religion and it breaks down into smaller ones. So you might be Catholic or Lutheran or Methodist or Protestant. You're all united under this Christianity umbrella. Okay, so Christianity is the prominent religion in these areas. If we look at education in these countries, they can say that 100% of their people are literate, which is really high for a country to say. Literate simply means that their adults have the ability to read and write, 100% of them. Okay, that's huge, okay, because with the ability to read and write usually equals pretty good jobs, usually gets paid well, and these areas are going to have some of the highest standards of the living in the world because their education system is so good. Economics, most of these countries in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s joined a trade organization called the European Union. Sometimes we refer to this as the EU. Okay, so what the European Union is, it was created really to help people with trade. Okay, so if you are in Europe, you can be invited to play a part in the European Union, which means if you trade within the European continent, you have like tax-free products, your products are cheaper, you get some deals. The European Union also regulates some of the things to protect the environment. Okay, so the European Union formed together, to help these countries out so they could trade. Gave them some benefits so you wouldn't go and trade with like South America or into the Asian continent, trade within each other. Okay, most countries that are a part of the EU have the same type of currency called the euro. So that's what we're looking at in this photo. Okay, some countries opted out. So like the United Kingdom opted out, they actually use the pound. Okay, but most countries use a type of currency called the euro. If we specifically look at the northern countries. Northern Europe, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland together are called Scandinavia or the Nordic nations. Okay, this region is full of islands and peninsulas. Their climate zones are actually quite different. So if you're in the northern part, it's very cold, the middle is a little bit better, and then the southern portion has kind of like what we have. Okay, their location influences their climate, what they do for a job, some of their cultural traditions, and so on. Okay, so if we look at this area, all of these countries were once home to the Vikings. Okay, the Vikings came over from Russia and took over these countries kind of consecutively throughout their time. Okay, the Vikings were a pretty harsh group of people, so when they came in, they typically got rid of all the people living in this area and took over the land. Some of these areas have some of the highest standards of living in the world, okay, which means they're paid really well for the same jobs we have here. So as a teacher, I would probably move to Sweden because I'd probably make $30,000 more than what I do here. Okay, because they're paid well, they have a pretty nice lifestyle, nice homes, good jobs, and so on. Along with having highest standards of living in the world, some of them have some of the best healthcare, longest longevity for age, and they do have really low birth rates, meaning they have a really aging population. Most countries in the northern part of Europe are Protestant, mostly Lutheran by nature. In the northern tier of these countries, they are in the subarctic or Arctic climate. Okay, because they're north of the Arctic Circle. Now, if you're north of the Arctic Circle in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, okay, they also get the nickname the land of the midnight sun. So in one of your clue checks, it asks this. And what that means is in the land of the midnight sun, the years kind of like split, okay, because they're right on top of the world. So if you think about how the sun kind of revolves around this section, okay, for 6 months of the year, they're in complete darkness, okay, which means at 10 a.m. it's dark outside, at 2 p.m. it's dark outside, at midnight it's dark outside. Okay, it might look like the sun is going to come up, but then it goes down beneath the horizon. Okay, but that also means for the other 6 months of the year, okay, that they're going to be in complete sunlight. Okay, so at 11 p.m. it's going to be sunny, at 1 a.m. it's going to be sunny, the sun never sets, so it gets really close to setting, but then it pops back up. Okay, which is why they're called the land of the midnight sun. If we think about the state of Alaska, they also have that same climate. Okay, one area that is very interesting with the North is the type of government that they have. So they have a democratic socialism with a parliamentary monarchy. Okay, so on your handout, that's the type of government they have. All right, this is pretty wordy. Okay, so we're going to kind of break that down and make it simplified. Okay, so we know that democracy is the government of people. We have that. Socialism, okay, is that this concept that everybody is working together, okay, to make a product. Okay, since everybody is working together, all people should share the profit of the product. Okay, so they believe in like government ownership and all the people will work for these different companies. Since everybody's working for them, that all people should benefit from the profits that the country makes off of these products. Okay, so that's like the main thing, but we're going to see on the next slide what that actually means. This is opposite to what we have in our country. Okay, we have capitalism, which tries to encourage private ownership. Okay, private ownership goes with the idea of free market or the supply and demand, so kind of opposite systems. Okay, so what this means for these people. Okay, so in these countries, like is an example of Denmark, these people pay really high taxes. So on each paycheck they get, okay, from their job, the government takes 60% of it. Okay, that's a lot. So if I made $5,000, okay, on my paycheck, okay, the government is going to take, almost 3,000 of it, okay, for themselves, and I'm only left with 2. Okay, but, okay, in return, the government is going to give them all this free stuff. Okay, they pay really high taxes each paycheck, but they're given free healthcare, free education, college is included, free lunch at school. Parental leave is really long, so if I had a child, which I have 3, I could take off over a year with each one, okay, and then come back and my job is still there. Pensions were also included by the government. Some areas get free electricity, free water, free sewer, free heat. So they pay really high taxes, but in return they get all of this free stuff. Okay, most people really don't mind their taxes going up, very opposite of what we see here in our country. We're going to spend a teeny bit of time on the UK specifically because we don't hit this a lot in our clue checks. So the United Kingdom has been a really influential nation since about the 1300s, 1400s. So during the 1400s, they had a type of government called feudalism. Feudalism was where you have the king as the leader, the nobles run the land, and the peasants do all the work. Okay, this time frame is going to be called the Middle Ages, also known as the medieval times. This is the time period between ancient and modern, which is called the middle. Okay, during this time, the world, or this area of the world, is in a lot of conflict. Usually we think conflict over land, but at this time it's going to be conflict because of religion. Okay, at this time, the Christian religion is very, very strong throughout the European continent. Okay, and during this time, people are going to go on pilgrimages. A pilgrimage is simply a trip because of your religion. At this time, people from Europe are going to go and visit Jerusalem because that was very important in the Christian religion and still is today. Okay, the problem with this is that Jerusalem during this time period was controlled by the Muslims. The Muslims is part of the Islamic religion. So Pope Urban II is going to make it his goal to take Jerusalem and take it back for the Catholics. Okay, so it's not about land, but specifically about the religion. So Pope Urban II is going to start something called the Crusades. He's going to gather up all the people that he can from the European continent and form an army, a religious army. And this religious army is going to go over to Jerusalem and start a war with the Muslims to get Jerusalem back. Okay, the first crusade, this was very successful. The problem is the Muslims are also going to fight back and more crusades are going to happen. So the crusades are going to be extremely violent in the time period of the Middle Ages, okay, and it's specifically where the Catholic religion is going to set out to kill another religion to gain back Jerusalem. Okay, so when we think about religion, religion can oftentimes be violent. Okay, as time goes on, we get past that medieval time, we enter the 1700s. So the United Kingdom, okay, in the 1700s had a lot of resources, thinking about the land. So they had a lot of coal, they had iron, they had a large labor force. Their transportation was really, really good with rivers and canals. In the 1800s, they're going to build the first railroads. All of this stuff is going to allow the United Kingdom to start an era called the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a revolution that affected the world. Okay, everybody that went through this usually became an industrialized nation, a pretty rich nation during this time. So the Industrial Revolution was the time period where we go from handmade products to where a factory is going to produce these products. Okay, so we go from a person making them to a machine making them. Okay, so handmade products are usually really good, but really slow. So maybe I make shoes and one day I can make 2 pairs of shoes, whereas this machine right next to me can produce 300 pairs of shoes. Well, the more products you produce, the more you can trade. The more you trade, the richer you are. Okay, so the United Kingdom is going to start the Industrial Revolution. People are going to move from farming to cities, okay, to work in these factories. The 3 main industries at this time are iron and steel, shipbuilding, and textiles. If we look at the economy of the United Kingdom today, they joined the European Union in 1973 and decided not to use the euro. They still use the pound. In 2016, they did vote themselves out of the European Union. They wanted to go off on their own. Most of their regions are nationalized, meaning owned by the government like we talked about before. Okay, if we are going to